Hey everyone, we're thrilled to announce that we at The Biographers officially have our first sponsor, McQueen Pipes. If you're like me, which is a nerd who appreciates high-quality handmade products that are also inspired by The Lord of the Rings, you gotta check out McQueen Pipes. You've got pipes with names like the Ranger, the Wizard, the Halfling, the Goblin, and the Barrel Rider. Whether you enjoy pipe tobacco, vaping, marijuana, or just appreciate the craftsmanship of a handmade, wood-stemmed pipe, McQueen Pipes has got you covered with all kinds of accessories to accommodate your smoking preferences. Check out McQueen Pipes today and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your order. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the Queen of England. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Don't wait for the return of the king. Check out McQueen Pipes today.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Lily.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to The Biographers.
I was doing a search for John Brown.
Okay.
And I remember a movie from the 90s with Judi Dench where she's named, it's called Mrs. Brown. And it is about her relationship with John Brown.
Interesting.
And then in the early 2000s, they did Victoria and Abdul.
I remember that, yeah.
And they say that's the unofficial sequel to Mrs. Brown. I think it was completely unrelated, and it's both Judi Dench. So I had completely forgotten about that. And I don't know if I actually ever saw it, but I used to be kind of like a big, watch all the Oscar movies kind of person. And so I was like, oh yeah, I really want to go watch this.
Yeah.
And the guy, I don't know the guy that plays John Brown. I wouldn't say he's particularly hunky, but he's rugged, I guess you could say.
Well, now I want to know. Now it's got me way too curious to sit here and not know. You said it's called Mrs. Brown?
Mrs. Brown, which is what they called her after that painting came out. Yes. So I was just like, oh, hey, Mrs. Brown, I remember this. There's so much to know.
Oh, it's Billy Connolly?
Yeah. Wait, who is he, though?
Oh, my God. So Billy Connolly, first of all, is an amazing banjo player.
Oh, well,
he
that's
is like a sensational banjo player. But he's a comedian. He's an actor. He's been in loads of different stuff.
I'm sure I've seen him in things because
he's Scottish.
Yeah, well, probably they would have a
accent.
Scottish person play John Brown. But anyway, I just thought that was funny because I talked about Victoria and Abdul, and then I just missed Mrs. Brown, even though as soon as do you remember walking around at Blockbuster?
Oh, heck yeah.
And seeing the covers of every movie? So if you ask me trivia about 80s and 90s films, even if I haven't seen them, I might know who was in it or even who directed it because I looked, it's like they were the movie poster and I memorized them trying to go through and pick which movie to rent on a Friday night.
For all you young whippersnappers out there, you don't understand. This is something that somebody brought up on some video I was watching recently, and they were talking about how the days before the internet. What did you do in the days before the internet?
We spent hours at Blockbuster Video.
So the amount of information that you had to go and absorb somewhere else. You couldn't just pick up a device and then be like, cool, let me absorb information. You had to find the thing that you wanted to absorb and obsess over it. Good example of this is when I was younger. I mean, I still love the Beatles. I can understand if you don't love the Beatles.
Most people love the Beatles.
But I am not one of those people that just goes I don't understand it. It's I don't like Taylor Swift. Not because of the music. It's just because I'm drowning in Taylor Swift and I don't want anything to do with it. And I feel like Taylor Swift is the new Beatles in a lot of ways, where a lot of these, people at the time were just going I'm over the freaking Beatles. No more. I don't want any more of this, But anyways, my case in point is this video came up this morning and it was Jack White from the White Stripes. And somebody goes, Jack, so you're telling me, you're saying, you're making the claim right now that I could play you 1 second of any Beatles song and you will know the song. And he was like, yeah. And I got every single one of them.
Well, that's the game Hurdle that has been...
So
it's gone now, but it was like the Wordle, but for songs.
I remember that
and
one.
I don't know why it's gone for some reason, but that's kind of like Hurdle. You would have been probably pretty good at Hurdle.
I played Hurdle. I played Wordle, Hurdle, and there's the
Quirtle?
the movie one.
Framed.
Is that what it was?
I think it's called Framed. And
Jamie told me about that one.
Yeah.
I played it. It was fun.
But that's another one. Like, I guessed the one yesterday.
The Wordle or the Framed?
The Framed.
Nice.
But I was like 3 guesses in. But I'd never seen the movie. But like I can use enough context
What
clues.
was it?
Well, it's Dracula. But
okay.
I just have never seen that like original Dracula. Although I told you that I saw the original Mummy a while ago.
Yes.
But I just had never seen it. But using context clues and memories of those movie poster covers of blockbuster movies, I can usually get it even if I haven't seen it.
Oh yeah, dude.
But if
it's
it was
amazing.
more recent, it wouldn't be so easy.
It's amazing. The crap that we absorbed when we were kids because we had to. It was like there was stuff that we just were like, I have to be obsessed with this because there's nothing else to feed my brain constantly than this type of information. So, anyhow, I can't remember exactly what my point was with all
I don't know.
of that,
I was talking about movies, and you were talking about knowing a second. Oh, I was talking about knowing what movie something is or who's in a movie.
And I was just talking about
randomly because of Blockbuster Video.
And so I will also say, by the way, going full circle back to Mrs. Brown.
Mrs. Brown.
I now have
Mrs. Brown.
Mrs. Brown. I now have a totally different image in my head of the man John Brown with Billy Connolly in his place, and I gotta say, it paints a completely different picture in my head because Billy Connolly is generally known to be pretty silly. He's a pretty silly guy.
Well,
He's pretty jokey.
We're gonna just have to watch this movie because
I know, right?
I'm guessing he was. I don't know. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, and I was like, oh man, I need to share this.
I like it.
Always learning more.
Well, I guess that's a lovely way for us to segue into saying hello, everyone, and welcome to the Biographers.
Welcome.
Woohoo! Technically speaking, this episode is going to be dropped on my birthday.
Happy almost birthday.
Almost birthday to me. This is recorded a couple weeks in advance. So for everybody that's listening to this episode live, or not live, I guess, but as it drops, day it drops, something like that, it will be my birthday, which is also a weird thing for me to admit because most people that know me know I don't really like my birthday. So I just tend to pipe down about it. But anyhow,
I, on the other hand, love my birthday.
I know everybody does. And people, like my wife, she tries to make it special and does cool things for me, and I really do appreciate it. It's just, I was having this conversation with some friends the other day, and or a couple weeks back, really, and I was saying how I think after 21, your birthdays become more and more disappointing because it feels like 21 is the zenith of birthdays. It's like, okay, yep, all of these ones prior, you're a kid, so let's have fun as a kid, and we're all working towards that 21 where we can all go out together and drink and celebrate. Then maybe 22 comes around, you have one more hurrah, and then by 23, people are just sort of like, dude, it's Tuesday, I can't go out
and nobody
anymore.
likes you when you're 23.
Touche.
If you don't get that, look it up.
If you don't get that, I'm sad.
You're probably young. You're probably 23.
It's true.
Yeah. Birthday. So the 21st birthday is the last birthday where you get something, except for the save the age 25 when your insurance. You can rent cars and like I think your insurance may drop.
24, I think is cars.
Oh, I thought it was 25, but whatever. Somewhere after that isn't even important. But yeah, 21 is the last thing where you get something out of your birthday. Every other year after that, you just get older and sadder.
That's true. That's true. And also, this is the weird one too, is that I don't know how in this country we can decide you are smart enough and a sound enough mind to serve in the military and vote at age 18, but you cannot drink alcohol for another couple years, and even further, you sure as hell cannot get a hotel room until you're 24. Okay, that is just like, that is pinnacle adulthood in America, is getting your own hotel room, apparently.
It's funny you say that because I was watching an episode of Bones, because I'm watching Bones all the way through.
You would watch
and
Bones.
I love it. And anyway, she's just talking to her daughter. Not Bones, another character is talking to her daughter.
Her name is Bones?
No, it's her nickname.
Oh, okay.
Her name is Temperance Brennan.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Anyway, but the other character is talking to her daughter, and her daughter is all like, I'm an adult, I can serve in the military. And she's like, but you can't drink. You still can't drink. And like, that was literally the episode I watched last night. It was making me laugh. Okay, let's go on to our new subject, because I'm excited to learn.
Yay! I'm excited to share it with everybody. And I should also say, first of all, we're I don't know if we're actually there yet, but for anybody that's listening, us here at the Biographers, we are very close to a milestone, thanks to all of you lovely people, which is, as of this morning, we're like 20 streams shy of 3,000 streams, which since launching in June is pretty intense for us. We're at like, what is this, episode 12 maybe?
I think it's 14.
13, 14? Anyways, that's exciting
It's
for
not
me.
that many episodes.
Especially when I was just thinking about this the other day too, about how, like, I want to say in either early Queen Victoria or late Mabel, I was like, dude, did you see? We're almost at 50 streams. And I was like very excited about it.
Yeah.
So it's very cool to see growth.
This is pretty cool. So
Right.
Who knew that this would actually be a thing? I mean, Daniel knew. I was like, oh yeah, we'll do this, and like maybe it'll be a thing.
Hey, I keep hearing these sort of whatever. I'm not super into the rah self phrases or whatever, but every once in a while something pops up in my little feed that I'm like, okay, that is really nice. And one of the things that I heard recently was like, if you're gonna bet anywhere, bet on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, dude, you know what? This is the older that I get, the truer it feels. Is that I'm just like, man, don't get me wrong, I've loved many of the companies that I've worked for and everything, but it's like, they're their own things. I'm just working there, you know?
Yeah, I think that I kind of had this epiphany earlier this year. This has been a weird year for me. And actually, I was just saying to my cousin yesterday, it's not the end of the year yet. It's toward the end of the year, but it's not the end of the year. And it doesn't feel like it's flown by. I've actually been able to do a lot of great and fun things and spend time with people that I love and care about and not be hunched over a computer all day, every day. And it's interesting because I remember all the things I did this year pretty well. And I don't feel like I've been sitting there Monday through Friday being like, gosh, I just wish it was Friday.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I love that, first of all. And for me, if nothing else with this podcast, it has felt like, and it's funny that you say that, because I'm kind of thinking about that now too, and how I'm like, no, it's true. I feel like the days, in a good way, have been going by slower.
Yeah, but yeah, not like a dragging on.
No,
like an enjoyable absorb what's happening and just be there.
It's like I read something. I don't know what the exact science is behind this, but I read something somewhere about how when you do new things, it feels like it's going slower because your brain has not forged pathways to process that yet. If you've done something a ton of times and then you go do it again, it's very likely you're going to forget what that was when you did it. That even if you did it for 4 or 5 hours, I felt like, for me, I've ridden a lot of one wheel, right? And at this point, I've gone through so much one wheel riding that I couldn't tell you how the last ride was with my buddies that I went on. It was just a fun time. But if I went and tried to learn an electric unicycle, totally different thing. And that would feel like a long day of trying to learn that. But it's because my brain is forging these new pathways into these things. You know what I mean?
That's interesting. And I was just editing a video to put on TikTok, and it was like, I remember how to do this, but I don't remember how to do this, but I'm getting faster at it, but I'm not frustrated. Like, I guess I'm not just like, why can't I do this? Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, hold on a minute. Let me figure out how to do this. The point of all this that I brought up in the time and the perceived slowness, I mean, time is a construct, but we're not going to talk about that. But the perceived slowness is more like kind of back to what you said about betting on yourself and working for someone else versus just working on something for yourself, and how I said this to you back last year, I think. If I invested as much time and energy in something like this, which I have, Daniel, I mean, I still have to give you props. He's doing a lot more on this than I am right now, but I've been kind of getting through some stuff. But if I invested all that energy on something like this, or any project that's a self thing versus somebody else where I exchange my time for money, which we have to do, you got to pay the bills, right?
Yep.
But like, imagine what we could do. So betting on yourself and like the fulfillment you get out of that. And like, so many people, especially this year, have been like laid off from their jobs and all these things. The company, we're a family. And then it's like, no, we're not. And obviously a business is going to just, whatever is good for the bottom line. And so they can say that, but then one day you walk in and you're let go for a layoff. I mean, you're not going to ever let yourself go for a layoff if you're doing your own thing. Right. So I also saw one last thing, and then we really should get on. I saw this great quote because I have a lot of perfectionism tendencies in certain areas of my life where I get like very, very frustrated if I can't do it well. And in addition to this, like, I've got all the supplies to do some painting, and I've got the supplies to do a scrapbook and all these things. And I'm like, but I'm not good at painting. And this quote I read the other day, and I don't know who said it, so it's just a phrase, basically, is make art. It doesn't have to be good. You just have to be doing it.
I would also say one of the things that this is a super old adage.
I think.
I agree.
Yes.
Maybe this is a super old adage that everybody knows, but I heard this strangely recently, and it was comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
So if you're sitting there painting and comparing what you're doing to somebody else, then yeah, it's going to be a miserable experience and it's going to be joyless because you're going, man, this doesn't look like the thing that I wish that it looked like that other person did. So if you start to change that mentality to say, I am doing this because I enjoy doing this, and I'm not even going to show this to anybody. This is going to stay in my basement in the closet, and I'm going to go look at it every once in a while because it's fun. And that's fine. That's great. That doesn't matter. You just had a great time enjoying yourself doing some painting. You know what I mean?
And if painting's not your thing, go to karaoke with your friends and sing your heart out, even if you're tone deaf. If you're having fun, do it.
I'm trying to tell that to Kat because Kat's all self-conscious about her voice, and she actually has a pretty good voice too. So I don't know. Apparently some ex-boyfriend when she was a teenager commented when she was singing in the car one time and was like, you have a very good voice. And
that's not nice.
I know, it's stupid.
Screw that guy.
And it just stuck with her. So I'm trying to get her to come do karaoke with me because I love karaoke.
I sang at my wedding with my friend, and my dad.
Did you? I don't remember that.
You don't remember. I don't know where you were, but we sang American Pie, and I finally, a year and a half later, got the video of it from the videographer, and it was less bad than I expected, but it was also really fun. So
it's great.
Instead of a first dance, we did a song, my dad and I, and then my friend as a assistant backup friend singer.
I love it.
Anyway, okay, who are we learning about now?
Well, funny you should ask, because today and for the next, I'm thinking probably somewhere between 5 to 6, possibly 7 parts of this series, we will be focusing on a man named Ian Fleming. So let's get into this.
Ian Fleming.
All right, now for this series, we'll be covering a global icon that, as strange as it may sound, you may never have heard of, in author Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming was a journalist, merchant banker, stockbroker, athlete, army cadet, drinker, lousy gambler, golfer, mountain climber, competitive skier, ladies' man, and member of the British social elite, all before the age of 30.
I didn't realize before the age of 30.
After the breakout of World War II, Ian became a member of the British military intelligence, helping to conceive and execute espionage missions that helped turn the tides of the war for the Allied forces and save countless lives. But perhaps more than all of these things, he was a novelist. Drawing very heavily from his own life experiences, Ian Fleming created one of the most iconic fictional characters of the 20th century, stretching still into the 21st century. A character whose popularity began in books but soon exploded once he made his big screen debut portrayed by actor Sean Connery in the 1962 film Dr. No. A character whose debonair ways, brilliant mind, and penchant for Aston Martin cars and martinis, shaken, not stirred, have continued to attract fans for over 60 years. A character known as Bond. James Bond.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun.
That's the Mission Impossible theme song.
Oh, oops.
That was perfect.
That was perfect. Okay, so
well done.
Not that we're trying to offend any blondes. I grew up blonde, and then as I got older, my hair got darker. But whatever just happened, that's so funny. I was literally in my head. Sure. I was like, "What's the theme to James Bond?" Oh yeah.
Well, that was perfect.
Please edit that out.
I am not editing out. That's staying in there for sure. That was amazing.
And the funny thing is, I knew who the topic was. I could have researched this before.
Oh my gosh, that was good.
But I was like, who knows?
To be fair, the Mission Impossible movies have been killing it recently. So,
I don't even know. Well, that was a foot in mouth. That was a shoe phone? No, that's Get Smart.
That's a speaker in mouth? Like a Bluetooth speaker in mouth?
I'm just saying a shoe in mouth, and then a foot, and then it was making me think of Get Smart.
Oh, well,
so
awesome
all of
too.
These are wonderful. But anyway, we're going to talk about Bond, James Bond.
Now, before we begin, as always, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the primary sources used for research in this series. The first is a book called Ian Fleming, The Man Behind James Bond by Andrew Lycett, who is a well-respected biographer, having completed other works on Rudyard Kipling and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Andrew's book on Ian Fleming is widely considered to be the most comprehensive and well-respected biography to date. I did also read through large portions of the book The Life of Ian Fleming by John Pearson, although it is worth noting that John Pearson was a good friend of Ian Fleming's through a large portion of Ian's life, so many historians see the book as being too close to the source material. Now, while I do agree with this, I still wanted to get more insight from someone who had actually known Ian Fleming, so I cross-referenced the book by John Pearson often to get a little bit more insight. I also read through excerpts of several James Bond novels, although admittedly, not extensively. And as always, if you're curious as to what sources we used for information on any of our series, you can find the list of links and books on our website, thebiographerspodcast.com. Now, let's get into the life of Ian Fleming.
Woohoo!
Ian Lancaster Fleming was born on May 28th, 1908, in London, England, to Valentine and Evelyn Fleming. His father, Valentine...
Sorry, I love that.
It's a great name, right?
Valentine.
His father, Valentine, tied his family roots back to Scotland, having a grandfather, who's Ian's great-grandfather, who operated a lint mill on the River Isla near Braemar, which is North Scotland, located in the Cairngorms National Park. And yes, I see that face.
What is a lint mill?
A lint mill is a mill that makes lint. I honestly don't know. I imagine it's like... I didn't look into what a lint mill is, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's probably something to do with sheep.
It's got to be something, yeah, where it's like turning stuff, like fluff into strands of stuff.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a good one for questions we ask ourselves and didn't answer during the podcast.
I would just be wondering if they like have giants, because they have giants in Scotland probably, right?
Obviously.
And then in Ireland nearby, there's that like Giants Causeway.
Yeah.
So there's giants there. And then they're picking up really big couches. And they're searching very large belly buttons.
And they're collecting that lint.
Yes.
And they're flicking it off to Braemar, where they're just processing that in a mill.
Yes.
Let me answer. We're smart.
I know, obviously.
It's just amazing.
Historically accurate, factual belly button lint.
That's amazing facts. Like, I didn't realize that this lint mill was mainly, gets its sources from the belly buttons of giants. Okay,
I'm gonna stop.
Now, I like that you like that so much.
There's always some random thing that just really gets me. I'm tearing up a little bit. Okay, but tell me more about Ian Fleming, who doesn't dance to the theme of Mission Impossible.
Now, for generations, the family motto for the Fleming clan has been, quote, "Let the good deed shaw." Now, Aubrey, do you know what a shaw is? S-H-A-W.
No.
So I did have to look this one up, okay? But once I did, this has quickly become one of my favorite phrases. The shaw is the part of the potato that grows above the ground. So in other words, though your good deeds may be amazing, they might be hidden and buried, mostly ignored by those that don't know what they're looking at. But for those that do know what they're looking at, they know the amazing thing they've uncovered.
That is so cool.
Isn't that cool? So if you're walking by a shaw, you don't know what potatoes are. They're not ugly, but they're not impressive plants. They're kind of viney, kind of stringy, little small purple flowers.
Purple flowers.
Little small ones when they do actually flower. But again, if you see a potato shaw, it's not gorgeous. It's just looks like some vegetation or whatever. But I'm sorry, there's not a person on the planet who doesn't love a potato. That's the point.
I didn't learn this when I watched The Martian and he was growing potatoes on Mars. He
should have. Honestly, come on. I don't know how at 35 almost I am just learning about what a shaw is, and I'm a potato head. I got Irish roots. You know what I mean?
Potato.
I'm a potato head.
Mr. Potato Head. Okay, keep going. Okay, I love that.
Isn't that really cool? So Ian's grandfather on his father's side, Robert, was ambitious, and at just age 13 left the family in Braemar and became a bookkeeper in Dundee, which is a city to the south of Braemar and resting in a bay in the North Sea. Now, Robert worked his way up the ladder for 12 years, and at age 25 was sent to America on a work trip for his company. In post-Civil War America, Robert saw what was economically possible through investment and legislation. So shortly after returning to Scotland, the Companies Act of 1862 was ratified, which introduced into law the idea of limited liability in a company, which effectively made it easy and possible for the metaphorical little guy to become an investor in a company and have an actual chance to succeed. Now, upon realizing this, Robert created an investors club, which would enable its members to invest securely and with little risk to themselves financially. This entire endeavor proved to be so lucrative and successful that his initial investment had to be rewritten 3 times to account for the mass volume of cash that was being thrown his way by investment hopefuls. Now, Robert really did seem to have a knack for investment, and by 1888, 20 years later, he moved to London where he established Robert Fleming and Company, which was a merchant bank that operated all the way up to the year 2000.
Wow.
Before it was bought by Chase Manhattan Bank. Now, this is the crazy part, too, is that in the biography that where I learned this initial information, the book by Andrew Lycett, Ian Fleming, the man behind James Bond, it was written in 95. So in the book, it's like, it was still open to this day. And I went, okay, let's find out if it is, because I've never heard of Robert Fleming and Company. Sure enough, I do some research onto it, and it was like, 5 years after the publishing of this book, it was actually dissolved.
Just acquired.
and acquired by Chase Manhattan Bank. So that was kind of interesting.
Huh, interesting. I mean, you were saying all that stuff about investment clubs. I had like 15 thoughts. One, my grandmother was a member of an investment club.
Was she?
Her and a bunch of ladies. They just did some investments, and they would research the stocks, and they would just invest. And
That's awesome.
My grandmother lived for 40 years on money. My grandfather died before I was born. She lived for about 40 years on the money that he left her through investments. She was very shrewd.
Get it, girl.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I was also thinking investment club and all the money coming at him. I was like, Bernie Madoff.
True.
But
now,
it didn't seem like it went that way.
No, he was not a man of a Ponzi scheme, so don't worry about that. Now, Robert was especially good with railroad bonds, and the work of his bank contributed to the building and success of the Pennsylvania, the Union Pacific, the Topeka, and the Santa Fe Railroad Companies.
Wow. Now, I've seen some of those names.
Right?
I got stopped behind a Santa Fe train on the way to DIA recently.
At age 35, Robert decided he had achieved enough success to finally get married, and not long after, Katie Hindmarsh, the handsome daughter of a revenue officer, became his wife. Between 1881 and 1887, Kate had 4 children: Dorothy, Kathleen, Philip, and the oldest, Valentine, who was Ian's father. Now, Valentine, or Val Fleming, was born in 1881. Seemed to be a fairly perfect child, always possessing a sense of nobility and propriety.
As the oldest always are.
Always.
I'm not the oldest.
Hey, my brother is. I would actually, like, reading through this, I'm like, yeah, no, this actually does kind of remind me of my brother. Like he has a very strong sense of propriety, of like who he is, about what his values are and stuff like that. I respect it. You know, I'm not saying that as a bad thing.
I was really joking.
I know, because you are not that at all.
I have no propriety and no values.
No, I'm kidding.
No. I also just wonder, where did the name Valentine come from?
That is true.
It's kind of like some what were the other names?
The siblings. Dorothy, Kathleen, and Philip.
Yeah, and then Valentine.
I don't know. I mean, as we go through this series, there are some names in here that I'm like, oh, that's a cool name, and I had never heard it before. So I just think it was of that time in the UK, there were a lot of just different names that we're not used to now that we think of. But
Valentine.
Anyway, kind of cool. So, his parents sent him, and this is Val I'm speaking about, his parents sent him to Eton College. You know that, because we were talking about it so much in Queen Victoria. And then to Oxford University, where he obtained a degree in history. He was a member of the Oligarch Society at Eton, and was a member of the rowing team as well. He continued to row at Oxford, and was even the field master for the New College and Magellan Beagles, which was the fox hunting club at the college. Okay. And the field master, remember, Val was the field master. So the field master, there's a very key rule in fox hunting that I didn't know, that as the entire hunt charges forward, the field master is the one, I'm pretty sure with the bugle, you cannot pass the field master. That is the rule of fox hunting. Okay. So you'll always see the formation either as like a bit of a scatter or like a goose V.
Okay.
The person at the very tip of that is the field master. That was what Val did for Oxford University at his time.
Okay.
So big deal, especially when you think of fox hunting being what it was in the culture of Britain and the UK.
Okay.
You have something for me?
I was just making sure my phone was silenced.
Oh, okay, cool.
It buzzed. And then I was like looking and listening. I was trying to do two things at once. It made me think of a joke.
What joke?
About you were talking about the shape of the fox hunting and the V, like a goose V. Let's see if I don't mess this up. You know how sometimes there's the V that the geese are flying in, like one side seems a little longer than the other? That's because there are more geese on that side.
I feel like that's a joke for the German people. You know what I mean? It's like, you want to hear, this is true. You want to hear a German joke?
Sure.
What did the farmer say when a whirlwind was destroying his crops?
I don't know.
A whirlwind is destroying my crops.
Yep. We got some good laughs in this one. Dun 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 dun.
This is another one. My friend David Neelan will love me for telling these jokes. Another German joke. Ask me if I'm a farmer.
Are you a farmer?
No.
Okay.
This is apparently German humor. He studied this in high school and said that his teacher told him these are German jokes. Okay, we are way off track here. So Val, by the way, who is again the field master for his fox hunting club at Oxford, was also the president of the undergraduates' common room and even passed the bar exam, but never practiced law. Everything Val did seemed to create a legacy that would come to prove difficult for his children to live up to, Ian especially. Now, once Val graduated from Oxford, he married the drop-dead gorgeous daughter of a local lawyer named Evelyn Beatrice St. Croix Rose.
Ooh.
I know. And by the way, there are pictures of Ian's mother, Evelyn, and it's credit where credit's due. She was really a beautiful woman, seriously. Now, Evelyn, or Eve, as most people called her, seemed to be the exact opposite choice from what you might expect of the upright, studious, and honorable Val. In contrast to him, Eve was an artist and spent hours playing violin or tucked behind an easel to work on her watercolors. She's described as frivolous, snobbish, and vain by author Andrew Lysette, and was said to have dressed in outlandish clothes with bright colors and over-the-top accessories like hats made from exotic materials that were outlandishly too big for her, much to the embarrassment of her children.
I think it sounds awesome.
I do too. I think it sounds rad. Now, Eve was also no slouch when it came to successful or distinguished family lineage. Her grandfathers, on both sides of the family, had been knighted in recognition of their career services. Eve's grandfather on her dad's side, Sir Philip Rose, was the legal advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. Uh-huh.
And there's the tie.
One of them. One of the many ties that we will have to Queen Victoria here, who is remembered today as the founder of the, quote, one nation conservatism, or in the UK, pardon me, or what many call Tory democracy. And we have said this many times. We don't understand the politics of the UK. So I don't know if this is good or bad. So I mean, he did these things. I don't know.
Yay! And he was the only Jewish prime minister ever.
Yay!
Disraeli.
Go Disraeli. Now, Eve's father on her mom's side, Sir Richard Quain, was born to a humble family in County Cork, Ireland, but went on to become a leading surgeon in London, writing and editing the celebrated medical encyclopedia, Quain's Dictionary of Medicine, which was seen as something of a Bible for British doctors for decades.
Ooh, it's probably like the Grey's Anatomy of then.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Additionally, Richard Quain was frequently called upon by Queen Victoria.
I never saw his name, though, in my stuff.
To diagnose the state of her health. I would imagine this would be in the much later years of her life.
Well, and probably because Dr. Clark was messing... Well, not later. That was Dr. Reed. But
right.
Dr. Reed was the official doctor, I think.
And I would also imagine, just looking at his pedigree, right, Quain's Dictionary of Medicine being what it was, I would imagine that he probably was just not available enough to be the personal called-upon doctor of the Queen. He probably had people under him that were just as good, and he was like, hey, I'm teaching in Germany, I can't be here to serve you all the time. I would imagine that would be probably something of the case. Now, Ian's parents, Valentine and Evelyn, are said to have met at a ball at Oxford and to have fallen for each other instantly.
Of course.
The two were married in February of 1906, and despite some reservations about the marriage, Val's father, Robert, gave him £250,000 as a wedding gift.
What?
Which in today's currency would be about £19.5 million, or about 25 million US dollars as of 2023. That was his wedding gift. Holy cow. When I first read it, I was like, okay, you're like multi-million, your dad, Robert's really wealthy, but $250,000, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. But I was also thinking like, man, I feel like it'd be a little bit more if you were doing that good. And then I did the currency conversion and went, oh, you gave him 20 million pounds for his freaking wedding.
That's one heck of a dowry.
That is unbelievable. Now, about a year later, they had their first son, Peter, born on May 31st, 1907, and then almost exactly a year later, on May 28th, so May 31st, May 28th, almost exactly a year later in 1908, Ian Lancaster Fleming was born, weighing in at just about 9 pounds. Big boy.
Do they? Yeah, that's big. Do they call that Irish twins? What is that called when you have a sibling that's less than a year apart from you? I think it is. I think it's Irish twins.
Yeah, okay. I said something way back in the day about when a person has a name that we don't think fits their let's say gender, sex, right? So if you meet a man named Ashley, you generally are like, oh, I thought Ashley was a girl's name. And I said I thought it was called a feminine Susan. That is not true. It is it's escaping me. Higgins from Ted Lasso says what it's called. It's like a feminine Julia. That's what it is. It's called a feminine Julia. Oh. So if you ever that exact situation, his name is Leslie in Ted Lasso. And so they go, oh, your first name is Leslie? And he goes, yes, I'm what you'd call a feminine Julia. That's the term for it. So anyways, just thought.
Well, and then I probably said that my great-grandfather was named Aubrey.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did know that.
Yeah. So I think I'm a masculine Johnny. I have no idea. I just made that up.
I like it. Oh gosh. Okay, now
you got the giggles today.
I know. I like it. Now, Eve claimed to be a descendant of John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster and son of Edward III, and so gave Ian the middle name of Lancaster in honor of her supposed family legacy. Eve and Val took a brief pause in progeny making, but then had 2 more sons, Richard and Michael, born in 1911 and 1913, respectively.
Wait, 4 boys?
4 boys.
I have a friend that has 4 boys. It's like a one in not very many. It's a very unlikely.
All Fleming boys. Yep.
Yeah.
Childhood for the Fleming boys seemed to be somewhat idyllic to start, as they went back and forth between their home in London and their large countryside property in Oxfordshire. This seemed to give Ian an early appreciation for both the wilderness and the finer parts of high society, as his family property in Oxfordshire had acres upon acres of woods and hills, and the home in London was an elaborately decorated Georgian home, as was most of the neighborhood. Pretty cool. In 1910, Ian's father, Val, was elected as a Conservative Member of Parliament, beating out the sitting representative, Philip Morrell. Apparently, it was no secret that Val's very beautiful wife, Evelyn, was a pretty serious contributing factor to Val's victory in the election. And upon hearing of Val's victory, the wife of opponent Philip Morrell, Lady Ottiline Morrell, marched over to Evelyn in public and shook her by the lapels. Now, I don't know. Does Lady Ottiline Morrell, is that ringing any bells for you?
No.
Well, let's talk about it. It's a fun little aside. For any of our long-term listeners, you might remember Lady Ottiline from our series on Mabel Dodge Luhan.
I don't have a very good memory sometimes.
Lady Ottiline Morrell was the source of inspiration for D.H. Lawrence's acclaimed masterpieces, plural, Women in Love, The Rainbow, and Lady Chatterley's Lover, and was the person who introduced the Honorable Dorothy Brett to D.H. Lawrence.
Oh.
That was Lady Ottiline Morrell.
Okay.
So following the breadcrumbs, Lady Ottiline Morrell is the reason that Dorothy Brett ended up in New Mexico. And is therefore the reason that Mabel Dodge Luhan knew Dorothy Brett.
That's so weird.
Because of this association, it is also entirely possible that Evelyn Fleming knew Dorothy Brett, or at least was aware of her, and therefore Mabel dodged Luhan too.
That's probably true.
Unbelievable, right?
Uh-huh.
Again, I'm not planning this stuff. It just keeps happening.
I know. And folks, as he's been doing his research, he's been texting me, I just found this thing and I can't tell you what it is, but I gotta tell you soon.
It just feels like the world is so small. Kat said something to me when I was telling her about this. She goes, I wonder if it has something to do with just the wealth of the time. And undoubtedly that does. If you had the money to go to the places that were cool,
you're
running
probably
in the same
circle.
Right, meet the same people. But that is not a list of club members, right? There's still so much happenstance that would go into coincidence of just like, oh my, there are millions of people that are wealthy. So the fact that these people are just like, we're finding these little connections, it just, gives me the fizz.
It does make me think of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
That is literally, there's another example that's going to
come soon.
I literally wrote it last night. It's in episode 4. I literally walked out of my room when I was writing it and I was like, Kat, I need to read you this paragraph. And I read the whole paragraph and I was like, that means that this person connected this person to 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 this person. It's like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. It was like unbelievable. So anyways, this stuff just gets me so jazzed. So during his time as an MP, Member of Parliament, Val would become a beloved and well-respected politician known for his honesty, integrity, and nobility, and would rub elbows with all of the politicians of the day, including a young Winston Churchill, who affectionately referred to Val and his brother Philip as, quote, the Flamingos. Winston Churchill called Ian Fleming's father a flamingo.
Okay.
That makes me so happy I can't even tell you.
We really should do Winston Churchill for one of these because he was very interesting.
I mean, undoubtedly, one day we will. I don't know when, because I have such a big list of other people that I'm curious to research, but he's there for sure. So, one of us. I'd be curious to know your perspective on Winston Churchill instead of mine.
I mean, what did I watch a couple years? I mean, I watched the movie with Gary Oldman in it when he played Winston Churchill.
Darkest Hour, I think.
Yeah, that was great.
I didn't see that one.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah. Anyway, I should.
And also, Gary Oldman's great.
You can't really go wrong with Gary Oldman.
He's one of the best actors of our time.
Of all time, I would say.
I mean, yes, of all time.
Not just our time.
He's incredible.
All right, now, in all of this high-class society, with its expectations, rigidity, and standards, enter the artistic, mischievous, romantic, and intelligent Ian Fleming. Ian was a mama's boy, at least to the extent that he had a very complicated relationship with her in a very classical sense. She had a very high set of standards and even higher expectations for all of her sons, and none of them could ever quite seem to live up.
Including Ian?
So
this sounds like Victoria.
Absolutely.
Victoria's sons, well, some of them. I mean, Bertie, she's...
So we'll get there in a second, but yes, Evelyn had a very, very high set of standards for her sons, just in general. She expected a lot out of them. She expected them to be successful. And when she was married to somebody like Val, who we're going to see a little bit more about him right now, you can see why she would look at her sons and go, hey, don't screw this up, because where you came from is a big deal. I mean, it's a strong family line with a lot of wealth, a lot of reputation, all that kind of stuff. Now, this seems to have hung particularly heavy on the sensitive young Ian, who inherited little of his father's demeanor. In contrast to the headstrong, steadfast, and serious natural leader that his father Val was, Ian was a prankster who often liked to stir up little bits of trouble, like moving a filled bedpan from the lavatory to a hiding place in the drawing room.
Oh, no, that's not a prank. That's a crime.
It's so gross. Now, his prankster nature was only made worse by a constant competition for affection and attention caused by his brother Peter's serious case of colitis, which is like a colon issue.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, Peter's sickness constantly took Eve away from Ian and the rest of his brothers, as Ian remembers at least 4 extended trips that Peter and his mother took to Switzerland for treatment, often leaving Ian alone to be tended by a nanny. Now, the only silver lining was that Ian's grandmother was left in charge of the house during Eve's absence, and Ian seemed to love and respect her greatly. Grandma Katie, or Granny Katie, as Ian called her, would introduce Ian to golfing during these times, which became a lifelong passion for Ian. Like, he never stopped golfing until the day he died.
You probably don't know this, but, when was golf invented?
It was invented by the Scottish. I want to say it was at least in the early 1800s, if not in the 1700s.
Okay.
It's been around a lot longer than you would think, and the evolution of it has been very, very slow.
Okay.
Just
like the game.
The way that it was...
I'm sorry. I couldn't.
That's well done. No, but way back when I was a youngster, I think it was in like PE, the way that my PE teacher told it to us, Mr. Larson, who was a great guy, and he wasn't just a PE teacher, he was really smart too. The way that he explained golf to us, and I'm not sure if there's truth to it, but he said that it was invented by the Scottish and that the initial forms of it were very basic. It was they had a stick and a rock and there was a gopher hole. And that was the game, was literally take the stick, smack the rock, get it into the gopher hole. Who can get it there in the fewest hits wins. That's the game. And then as time went on, you can imagine some dude went, well, if I take my stick and I carve it up, I'm going to be able to hit this rock a lot better. And then the next person went, dude, if I take this rock and I get a really round one, this is going to roll better. And then you can see the evolution of it. Hey, if I take something instead of this, I can do that. Hey, we should actually curate the lawn so that it's nicer. Like,
this is the most interesting that golf has ever been.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you. And then there was Caddyshack.
Oh, touche. I can't beat Caddyshack. That's just...
Okay, sorry, Uncle Howard and Granddaddy. Golf's wonderful.
Hey, golf can be wonderful. I get you. Sometimes a little bit of a bro culture these
I can't
days,
hit
but...
the ball. It's terrible. I can't even top golf. I can barely anyway, I don't know.
Oh, good. Well, so due to the constant attention that Peter received, Ian grew resentful and the two were said to fight like cats and dogs. Despite all of this, the Fleming family did seem to have a relatively close and affectionate relationship, all of them having nicknames assigned. So Val was Mokey, having come from Ian and Peter trying to say Smokey as kids because Val was like really into smoking his pipe tobacco.
Okay.
Evelyn was Mewy. Ian was called Johnny by his father Val, but was called M by his mother.
M.
Interesting, right?
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Is that the right one? Just kidding. I totally knew that is the right one.
So, during his childhood, the Flemings would take yearly vacations to the coastal town of Salcombe in Devon, which later provided the inspiration and backdrop for James Bond's own childhood. In his 1963 novel, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Bond describes his own childhood, which is really Ian's, saying, quote, "The painful grit of wet sand between young toes, when the time came for him to put his shoes and socks on. Of the precious little pile of seashells and the interesting wreck in the sill of his bedroom window. Of the small crabs scuttling away from the nervous fingers groping beneath the seaweed in the small rock pools. What a long time ago they were, those bucket and spade days. How far he had come since the freckles, and the Cadbury milk chocolate flakes, and the fizzy lemonade." And yes, every James Bond quote I'm doing will be in Sean Connery form.
Okay, so this is an episode that we really should have been recording because the way that Daniel's face looks when he does his Scottish Sean Connery accent is very Scottish.
That's half of it. You got to perform it. You know what I mean? Okay. Now, the holiday in 1913 proved to be the last truly complete one for Ian, as in the summer of 1914, the Great War had broken out in Europe, and his father Valentine had ridden off to the war as a captain for the Queen's own Oxfordshire Hussars, which was a mounted group of volunteers, which also consisted of Winston Churchill's brother, Jack. So Val was fighting with Jack Churchill, which is pretty crazy. Now, by November of 1914, the war had escalated drastically, and Val found himself being promoted to major. Back home in England, Ian's mother, Evelyn, tried her best to carry on without Val and began the process of admissions for Ian and Peter to the prestigious Durnford School, which was known for its discipline and high transfer rate to Eton College.
Oh.
Which is a big deal for them. Because remember, Val went to Eton, so it's like, gotta go to Eton.
Mm-hmm.
Ian officially started at Durnford in 1916, and it was here that he received that rare mix of intense discipline and genuine encouragement that would forever shape his life. Durnford School was brutal, no doubt, okay? But the headmaster, Tom Pellet, or TP as the students called him, I don't know why. Maybe TP wasn't the common term for toilet paper at that point, but
yeah,
whatever.
Maybe
they
not.
called him TP. He believed in fostering the he believed in fostering the natural way of a student and wrote, quote, "Our policy was not to suppress anything in a child, i.e., if there was a kink in the boy's nature, let it appear, and then you could see what it was and possibly cope with it."
I like that.
Pretty cool, right?
Even though you said it was brutal also.
It was brutal. A little bit. It was really just things like, I might even mention it in a few minutes here, bad food, it was cold, outhouses only. It was still in a time where corporal punishment was allowed in the classrooms, things like that.
I can imagine it might be rough for someone who might like to put filled up chamber pots in nasty places.
Oh, it was literally like, we're going to whip this sucker into shape. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it was a prep school for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, despite this sounding, I think this is where I'm going into it, like a lovely setting for a young person to grow up in, one former pupil at the school described his experiences at Durnford after having served in the British Special Air Services in World War II by saying, quote, "After Durnford, the SAS was a piece of cake."
Oh, God.
So that can give you an idea of how Durnford was. Apparently, conditions at the school were fairly abysmal. No working toilets, outhouses only, terrible food that was only made worse by food rationing caused by the war in Europe, and of course, rampant, relentless bullying. Lots of that. Now, this harsh proving ground did end up having some benefit for the young Fleming brothers, Ian and Peter, as the two soon put aside their past differences, banded together, and before long, the two boys found themselves being bullied less and less, and began to do a bit of bullying themselves. That's how the tables turn. During his time at Durnford, Ian tried to keep in touch with his father, Val, and tried to convey his growing masculinity through his letters. But Val continuously minimized the horrors of war in his responses, with recounted stories like, quote, "I saw a lot of aeroplanes today. The place they live is near here. They send up rockets in the evening in case any of them lose their way in the dark." So sweet, right? He's writing to his little boy Ian, trying to make it seem like,
oh, the war's not so bad.
Where the planes live is close by and they flew over. However, Val did not sugarcoat the war when writing to his friend Winston Churchill, and describes his own experiences in horrifying detail by saying, quote, "Day and night in this area are made hideous by the incessant crash and whistle and roar of every sort of projectile, by sinister columns of smoke and flame, by the cries of wounded men, by the piteous calls of animals of all sorts, abandoned, starved, perhaps wounded. Along this terrain of death stretch more or less parallel to each other lines of trenches, some 200, some 1,000 yards apart, hardly visible, except to the aeroplanes which continually hover over them, menacing and uncanny harbingers of fresh showers of destruction. It's going to be a long, long war, in spite of the fact that every single man in it wants it stopped at once."
I'm thinking about the way that when Victoria was learning of the wars, and then they would write fake versions of what was happening and how the people were glad to be there.
Yep.
Very similar. But she wasn't a little boy.
Right, but super, super horrifying.
Yeah, and
this.
Also on top of that, when you were wounded, they didn't have a lot of the stuff that we have now. Also, maybe some of the things that could wound you weren't as insane, but I don't know. I can't really speak accurately about war.
Val continued, desperately asking Churchill, quote, "I do wonder what on earth you are really doing to stop this war." For 2.5 years, Val fought on the front lines of the First World War, at the time known as the Great War. On May 20th, 1917, Val and his regiment were stationed across the Hindenburg Line north of St. Quentin, and as Val and a fellow officer tried to crawl between trenches, a German bombardment was fired, with Val and his compatriot taking a direct hit from a German artillery shell and dying instantly.
I was waiting for this. I figured this was going to be a tragic death of a father.
This was just 1 week before Ian would have turned 9. Really, really sad, right? Now, this is obviously World War I, so several million people died. But anyhow. Now, a few days after Val's death, a telegram arrived at the Fleming household with the news, just as Evelyn and Peter were arriving back from the hospital. Peter was having his tonsils removed. No account exists of how Ian felt or reacted upon receiving the news of his father's death, as he was at the Durnford boarding school at the time, and he later claimed that he had little to no memory of his father. Now, even if he was home for the tragic news, Peter's account of the event paints a pretty good picture as to how they would have dealt with Ian too. So apparently, when Evelyn read the news, she simply shuttled Peter off to bed without saying anything. The whole night, Peter could hear people crying and probably had some guesses as to what had happened, but in the morning, at the crack of dawn, Evelyn had Peter's things packed and sent him back to the boarding school too. And that was basically it. It was very unceremonious for the kids. Now, regardless of how any of the Fleming boys felt or reacted to their father's untimely death, Valentine's legacy, real or romanticized posthumously, would forevermore cast a shadowy standard for his sons to live up to. Ian, being the opposite of Val in many ways, would feel this the most. Winston Churchill wrote a piece in The Times titled Valentine Fleming, An Appreciation. With the line, quote, Valentine Fleming was one of those young conservatives who easily and naturally combined loyalty to party ties with a broad, liberal outlook upon affairs and a total absence of class prejudice. He had everything in the world to make him happy: a delightful home life, active, interesting, expanding business occupations, contented disposition, a lovable and charming personality. He had more. He had the foundation of spontaneous and almost unconscious self-suppression. Again, from Ian's perspective, these were big shoes to fill. And his mother often made sure he remembered it.
Yeah.
Right. Now, such was the intensity of Evelyn's indoctrination that she would make the Fleming boys end their nightly prayers with, quote, "And please, dear God, help me to grow up to be more like Moki."
Oh, wow.
That is how intense this was. They're praying to God, saying, make me more like my dad.
Father.
Pretty crazy. Now, Evelyn did seem to genuinely miss Val and believe in his greatness, but it is also worth noting that in his will, which he signed only a few weeks before leaving to war, Val left a condition in the trust fund for his family. Of the nearly £260,000 estate that Val left for his wife and children, Eve would receive her fair share so long as she remained unmarried. But if she did remarry, her yearly inheritance would be reduced to £3,000 per year.
Interesting.
Now, while £3,000 at the time would have been more than enough for most common folk to live on, it would have meant a significant reduction in lifestyle, something that Evelyn Beatrice St. Croix Rose was simply unwilling to do.
Interesting.
It is also worth noting that Evelyn never believed that Val did this to her intentionally, and forever said that it was, quote, a bad will. that Val read in haste as he prepared to go off to war. Now, if you think about this, it actually does make a lot of sense. So if the British government is saying, hey, we need all able-bodied men to come over and fight for us, and they're like, okay, cool, what do we got to do? Like, all right, here's the list of things we got to do. We got you into training. We got to get your uniform. We got to get you this. We got to get you that. We got to get your paperwork. We got to do that. And you're going through it, and they go, here's your standard will. This is going to make it so that all your wife and kids have all the money that you have. You go, great, and you sign it, and you go and do your training. You're probably not going to take that will and go, well, hang on a second, Sergeant. Can I have a week or two to go review this with my lawyer before I sign it?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the conclusion that Evelyn came to as well, that it was like, dude was about to go off and fight in the biggest war the world has ever seen, ever. You know, well, World War II was coming, but at that point, it was the biggest war that the world had ever seen. So she, I think, always kind of gave him that grace. She was like, I don't think you did this to me intentionally. I don't think you meant to make it so that I could never remarry. I just think you signed it and didn't see a clause that said I couldn't remarry.
The other thing, too, though, is her family had money, right?
They did. They did.
Now, I don't know, because a lot of times, I don't know if they would have given her anymore. They'd already given a dowry for her, but I don't know.
And we're going to see a little bit more of that later on. But in these days, it was much like royal succession, where it was like firstborns are very important. That was very often the case as well with these sort of social elites, rich people kind of a thing. There was also a lot of things like assumptions on when Evelyn got married to Val. She was set. She's fine. She had all the money she needed, so her family was like, no, the inheritance is going to go to these other people who actually need it. You don't. But there's a lot of pride involved at the time, or you don't want to speak up. And,
you marry people off, especially girls. You marry them off, and then they're not your problem anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So with the absence of a father, Eve also did her best to step up and play dad when she could, even occasionally dressing up in unflattering garb and teaching her boys how to fish. Pretty cool. Eve's mother, Granny Katie, also did her best to help fill the void and would often pick up Ian and Peter in her Rolls Royce for a few rounds of golf.
Very nice.
She herself being an avid golfer who liked to play 2 rounds a day.
Woof.
Awesome, Granny Katie. Go, Granny Katie. And not even just about golf, just that you're out there, you know?
Yeah.
Now, the years went on like this, with Peter eventually going off to Eton College at about age 13, and then Ian following suit in 1921. Okay? Now, while enrolled at Eton, Ian and Peter were both assigned a boarding home for pupils called the Timbrels, which was overseen by a sadistic man named E.V. Slater. That just sounds like the name of a sadistic man, who is known for his love of beating pupils with a cane should they break any rules or get out of line.
Ugh.
Having been through the fairly brutal Durnford School seemed to help in this regard, as Ian makes less note of the Timbrels' house affecting him versus Durnford. Now, while at Eton, Ian proved to be an incredibly bright student, quickly becoming a favorite of his instructors, known for his wit, sense of humor, and incredible ability for languages. Like many bright minds, however, Ian always struggled in the classroom and was never able to compete academically with his peers. Determined to succeed somehow, Ian started moving into sports and developed himself into an athlete, excelling in track and field. He had finally discovered that his tall, thin physique didn't have to be awkward. In fact, it could be an advantage in athletics. Through his academic athletic career, Ian would win the under-16 long jump in March of 1922, and then in 1923 would win the junior hurdles title and also help clinch some important victories as the bowler of Eton's cricket team.
Oh.
In 1924, Ian would win 6 more junior titles, which is a feat that had never been done before and, to my knowledge, has never been repeated. At Eton College, anyways. There was one small black mark in his sporting career, however, that would affect him for the rest of his life. During a football match, and that's English football, by the way, in 1926, Ian collided with the brother of a future prime minister named Henry Douglas Home and broke his nose. Ian did. He broke his nose. Medical science not exactly being a science yet, Ian was fitted with a thin copper plate under the skin of his nose to keep everything in place.
Yikes.
Yeah.
My nose hurts.
Yeah. This little piece of copper would prove to be a source of unending misery for Ian, causing blinding headaches and blurred vision.
Yikes.
So nasty. It is also worth noting that a tradition at Eton was to cane the legs of all students who committed misdemeanors at noon every day, and that there are accounts of Ian having to compete in sporting events with his pants, shorts, or even bare legs covered in his own blood. That's Eton College for you. And we touched on this lightly at some point in Victoria. We were talking about it, I remember. Many also speculate that through his times at various schools that used extreme corporal punishment techniques, Ian later incorporated sadistic torture techniques to the mythos of James Bond's villainous enemies. Which, think about it. All the weird ways that his enemies try to kill James Bond, that had to have come from somewhere, right? It's not just, you're just, let
me think of this.
It's like, no.
Inspired by
literally
Eton
sitting
College.
there, Eton College, the Timbrels, the Durnford School, all these sadistic, crazy people that are like hitting him for like, you dropped your spoon.
Yeah.
It's like, geez, man. Now, I have also read rumors that Ian developed a bit of a spanking kink in his adult life, but that kind of stuff isn't really what this podcast is about.
No.
I'm just going to skip over that one because I just also feel like, come on, people's personal lives like that, I don't really want to, rip apart. It's just not my business. But anyway, in that regard, like, I'm literally ripping this guy's life apart, but like, I don't know, when it comes to what goes on in the bedroom, just chill, leave it alone. For this podcast, anyway. Now, at Eton, Ian made a lifelong friend named Ivor Bryce, and we're going to be talking throughout this whole series many times about Ivor Bryce. So all of the names I've mentioned so far, Ivor Bryce.
Ivor's going to stick around.
He's going to be around a lot. Remember that name. Ivan and Ian are bestest friends, and they will be basically for forever. Also remember his mother, Evelyn, his brother, Peter. Those, as of now, are like the big names. So as long as you remember those, we're going to be okay moving forward.
Okay.
At least as of now. Now, Ivor was actually a rekindling of an old friendship he had established as a child while on vacation in Cornwall. Ivor and Ian were nearly inseparable and soon became known for skipping classes together to meet girls at the local pub.
Ooh.
Something Ian had also recently become enamored with. That's girls.
And drink. Oh, you said he was a lifelong drinker too.
Oh,
so.
many things, but
girls.
Women might be his number one love in life, Ian Fleming. For sure. Now, Ian found Ivor's friendship particularly helpful in the arena of women, as Ivor had Peruvian heritage, which gave him an olive complexion that all the pale English girls found exotic and alluring.
Ooh, hot Latin
Exactly.
wingman.
Now, during his time at Eton, Ian was also given his first taste of publishing, as Eton allowed students to self-publish short writing pieces that were referred to as ephemerals. I don't really know why.
Okay.
Both Ian and Ivor had become infatuated with a newer literary prodigy named D.H. Lawrence. And both became inspired to publish their own ephemeral as a result. In reference to a poem written by D.H. Lawrence called Snapdragon, 2 words, Ivor even named his ephemeral Snapdragon. 1 word.
I mean, that's different.
It's different, obviously.
Not plagiarism.
Ian's ephemeral was a fictitious tale of lovers, suicide, and forgiveness called The Ordeal of Carol St. George.
Oh, okay.
With their combined profits, because yes, they could sell these ephemerals and make money off of it.
Nice.
With their combined profits from their individual ephemeral publications, the two purchased a small Douglas motorcycle that they used to go on adventures and promiscuous rendezvous around the Windsor area and beyond to towns like Maidenhead and Bray.
Okay.
These trips would later serve as a source material for Ian in his James Bond book, The Spy Who Loved Me, in which James seduces a female protagonist, Vivienne Michel, on the floor of a theater box at the Royal Cinema on Farquhar Street. Ian admitted to a friend later on in life that this story of Bond's seduction of Vivienne was in fact the story of how Ian himself lost his virginity.
Ooh!
Pretty awesome, dude. I'm not gonna lie.
But
That's
also,
pretty
I'm thinking
cool.
about the floor of a theater box.
The royal
would have been
cinema,
cleaner.
though.
Would have been
It would've
cleaner than I'm
immaculate.
thinking of. I was like, ugh, the floor.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Like, I mean, sanitation had gotten better, but like your shoes and anyway,
True.
but also super cool.
Super cool. I mean, come on. Like, not that stuff is like it means that much to me or whatever, but it's like that's pretty neat, you know. And especially knowing that that's like the James Bond story, and you're like, dude, that's actually how he was
Yeah.
getting frisky. So in 1923, Ian's mother Eve finally decided to move out of the massive family estate known as Pitt House and into a smaller piece of land in Chelsea just along the Thames River that was previously owned by English painter J.M.W. Turner, who is known for his romantic style of oil paintings and watercolors. Kind of neat. There, Eve decided it was high time for a rebranding, and rather than focusing her efforts, time, and money on political campaigns and parties, she would now become a patron of the arts and supporter of the ever-growing Bohemian movement in Chelsea.
What?
As a small aside, I have no way to prove this at all, but I'd like to think that it being 1923, Eve had been reading and hearing all about the antics of Mabel Dodge Luhan and Gertrude Stein, and was basically trying to do this exact same thing, but in England.
Surely.
I mean, right? Now, this is really more of a whimsical hope on my part, but in a move very similar to Mabel Dodge Luhan and Maurice Stern, who was an artist, if you remember.
Uh-huh.
Evelyn soon fell deeply in love with a renowned painter named Augustus John. Now, Aubrey, buckle up.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I thought it needed to be buckled before, but I guess
Buckle up for this one.
buckling up.
Augustus John refused to marry Eve. But Eve, in her desperation to have a daughter of her own, remember she had 4 boys with Val, Eve kidnapped one of Augustus's daughters from another mistress and took her away to northern Wales.
What?
Yes. Okay. However, Augustus quickly figured this out, found his daughter, took her back, but for whatever reason, Eve was utterly determined to have a daughter of her own. So in the spring of 1925, Eve accompanied Augustus on a business trip to Berlin.
Wait, after she'd kidnapped his daughter?
They continued to see each other.
Okay.
Yes.
People have always made bad decisions.
After.
Keep going.
After she stole his daughter, they continued to see each other. So in the spring of 1925, when Eve was accompanying Augustus on that business trip to paint the portrait of the British ambassador to Germany, Gustav Stresemann, and upon returning to England, Eve was pregnant.
Oh.
But remember, in order to receive her inheritance from Val's will,
She
she
couldn't be
needed
married.
to stay a widow. Okay?
Yeah.
In order to prevent anyone from knowing the real story, Eve closed down her entire house and announced to her small staff that she would be going away for an extended holiday cruise.
Uh-huh.
When she got back, just about 9 months later, she arrived with a baby daughter, claiming she had
She'd
adopted the
adopted her.
infant in her travels.
Uh-huh.
That is how Ian came to learn of his half-sister, Amaryllis.
Okay.
Unbelievable, right?
Uh-huh.
This is his mother. Stole a baby.
Stole a baby, then had a baby.
With the guy she stole the baby from.
I know. Like, yikes, man.
Holy moly, that is complicated stew. Okay, now despite Ian having natural gifts with speaking foreign languages and writing, again, he always struggled academically, and in his final years at Eton, did not place well in his end-of-year exams. His mother was determined to make a success of him that emulated his father Val, and with Peter acing his exams and being accepted to Oxford University, Evelyn decided that Ian would follow in Val's footsteps in a different way. She would send Ian off to the army. Yeah. Now, in order for Eve to get Ian into the right part of the army, she needed to call upon some of her royal connections, which just happened to go all the way to Buckingham Palace. At this point in time, the crown of Britain was being worn by George V, who took the throne just 9 years after Queen Victoria's death, as we already know. Thanks to Aubrey's amazing series on Queen Victoria, we have now a lot more context for how royalty and succession work, but in this case, things were a lot more straightforward in that George V was the son of Victoria. Wasn't he? Could have sworn.
I guess, did Bertie have no children? I don't have my book.
I can't remember. I could have sworn. I initially had it written as a grandson of Victoria, and then I thought I looked it up and it was son. Maybe I'll make a correction on that one. I could have sworn he was the son of Queen
You're
Victoria.
probably right. Anyway, descendant.
However, George V's wife, known as Mary of Teck, who you know because you just talked about her in our last episode, or Queen Regent Mary, had become personal friends with Ian's grandmother, Granny Katie.
Granny Katie.
Again, dude.
All connected.
All connected. I don't know how you do this. It's just
we
here.
did not
It's
plan
amazing.
this.
It's like, oh, cool. And then it also happens that the son of this person, his wife, actually becomes best friends with Ian Fleming's grandma. Like, that's what I'm saying. The 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon are so real. It's scary sometimes. Eve took full advantage of this connection over the years, and herself became lifelong friends with George V's cousin, Princess Marie-Louise of Schleswig-Holstein.
I loved all those German names.
It was very, very German.
Schleswig. Holstein. That's a cow.
Is it? I didn't know
It's
that.
a type of cow. I think it's like the kind of cow that we all eat, pretty much.
Fair
Holstein
enough.
cows.
And by the way, Princess Marie-Louise's mother, Princess Helena, was the third daughter of Queen Victoria. It's, again, just connection.
We can't make this up.
It's crazy. Now, with the help of Princess Marie-Louise, Eve was able to formulate a plan for Ian where, upon his completion of Eton College, he would be guaranteed a place in one of the most coveted and prestigious infantry regiments in the British military. The 60th Rifles, also known as the King's Royal Rifle Corps. That's where she wanted Ian to go.
Okay.
A position in this infantry group could be obtained if Ian was able to get into the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, where Ian's father Val, along with classmate Winston Churchill, had previously attended.
Okay.
With the plan now fully baked, Eve wrote to Eton College and had Ian removed from the traditional curriculum of courses and placed into the Army class of Eton's program. Yes, Eton College had an educational track to get their students into the Army.
Okay.
I don't know why or how.
Well, I mean, I think you'd become an officer.
I guess, but
I mean, I think it's like going to the Air Force Academy.
I guess so.
Sort of.
It just seems strange to me that a very seemingly accredited school,
Academic,
right, would also have this like branch of like, oh yeah, that we can also help you work to get into the Royal Military Academy.
Yeah,
like,
but the military was very important in the British Empire and everything.
True.
So
That's
it's
true.
not like they want really good people.
That's fair. I guess for me, I just found it surprising because it would be like if you went to USC and USC was like, oh, you can also just enroll in our military career program and get your degree in military goings-ons.
But if you like go to like Texas A&M, like there's the cadets and everything, and if you go,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like there's a lot of like ROTC and things like that. Like there's stuff like that. I mean, I guess it seems like if you went to Harvard and then you went into the Army from Harvard or something, but
I know about ROTC. I didn't put two and two together for like thinking it would be in a college somewhere or whatever.
Yeah, at Texas A&M, it's a big deal.
Well, fair enough.
So I don't know. I don't know enough about Eton College but anyway.
All good. Now, if Eve's intentions in enrolling Ian in this particular program were born from the desire to see Ian succeed, they were lost on Ian. Traditionally, the students that were enrolled in the Army class weren't exactly what you'd call thinkers. If this whole situation were a teen romp movie from the early 1980s, the Army class would undoubtedly be the evil football team or the frat house with all the dumb, mean jocks. Like, that's basically where she's sending him. So though Ian was athletic, his athleticism usually lent itself to speed and agility rather than brute force or muscle.
Okay.
By all other accounts, Ian was an intellectual and just couldn't understand how his mother could think so low of him, which I kind of understand. You know what I mean? Despite having this plan in place, Eve was still concerned that Ian wouldn't be able to pass his exams, so she had him sent to an affiliated prep school of sorts known as a crammer, which is a fun little name because you're cramming for an exam, right?
Like a tutor almost.
Yeah, it's like a specific it's a program you go into basically with a few other people, and it's called a crammer, and it specializes in whipping students into academic shape in preparation for their exams. Ian was put under the tutelage of the strict Colonel William Trevor, and though he was only there for 3 months, it all seems to have paid off, as Ian passed his exams to the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, placing 11th of the 120 students that took the exams.
Well, he was one of the thinkers.
Pretty good. Of Ian's achievements on the exam, the strict Colonel William Trevor wrote to Ian's mother Eve and said, quote, Ian ought to make an excellent soldier, provided always that the ladies don't ruin him. Again, we can see some early inspiration for James Bond. In contrast to all his military strictness and academic discipline, Ian had become increasingly interested and enamored by the romantic authors and poets of the early 1800s, in particular Lord Byron, who we talked about as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ian himself even took to writing poetry frequently. Some of it good, albeit derivative, with one example reading, quote, What is a book? A mirrored pool of thoughts, ideals, so often better left unsaid, so often better left with the soft outline of dream. It's very...
He got better.
It's very... you know.
Yeah, he got better.
I just love if you read the lines too, it's so often better left unsaid, so often better left. Next line. Like it's... I can't even find the words, so I have to go to the next line. I don't know. I can't explain it. It's just very funny to me how it's written. It feels very juvenile. Even further, this was the time that Ian seemed to be discovering his own tastes in things, discovering that he loved all things exotic, new, and daring. Despite his mother being a trained violinist and having a fairly strict classical taste, Ian was a fan of the new American tunes coming out of Tin Pan Alley, and obviously jazz, which had been sweeping the world over for the past few years. Remember, this was just about 1926, so for context, the standard drum kit, or set as we know it today, wasn't even complete yet. Okay, as the hi-hat, if anybody doesn't know what the hi-hat is, it's those two cymbals that you use your foot and they clamp together like a clamshell. Okay, the hi-hat wouldn't be invented for another 2 years. Okay, the first recording we have of a complete drum kit is from 1927 with the jazz drummer Gene Krupa, for any jazz heads out there. So if we ever think it's cool that we have grown up in a time that we saw rap or hip-hop or rock and roll or even the blues become an art form, imagine growing up in a time before the drum set existed and then watching it change the way we create, appreciate, and interact with music. That's amazing. So Ian got to experience that firsthand.
It's like new technology in music.
It really is. But I just can't even imagine witnessing the birth of a brand new category of instrument, to say that drums don't have to be done by 3 or 4 people now. It can be done by a single person who's skilled. That's amazing that he got to witness that birth. And then if you think about that too, how the drum set then influenced jazz and then blues and then rock and roll. It's crazy to think that those forms would not have existed without the drum set. So that had to happen first. And he was literally in his teens when he was witnessing the drum set be created.
That's cool.
And start to emerge on records. I don't know.
Daniel's a big music guy.
I've been playing drums since I was 13, so I've known this little fun fact since I took drum lessons when I was 12, because my instructor told me the whole history about the drum set. And so I've just been waiting for the moment in my adult life to be I'm gonna nerd out and tell people about the drums.
This fact is actually relevant.
It's really cool. All right. When Eve suggested that Ian take a trip to Austria to attend a finishing school called the Tenoroff before going to Sandhurst, he was overjoyed, as he had never been able to take a trip abroad without a member of his family.
Okay, so he went to the what's the Harry Potter where the guys come at the. He went to the Durmstrang. What's that? Durmstrang. He went to that school, and then he went. Well, it wasn't that school. It was that's what I'm associating with it, Victor Crumb's school.
I was honestly, it's funny you say that because that was exactly what I thought when I saw Durnford. I was like, oh, it's like Durmstrang.
Yes. So then he went to Eton College, which is not a college in the U.S. sense. It is a high school, basically.
It's basically it's what I think they would call a secondary school.
Yes, but it's it is you people go to those, and then he went to the Crammer because he wasn't gonna do as well in Eton College in his final exams to then go to, you said, a finishing school.
No, okay, so here's the sequence of events. So both Ian and Peter went to Eton College, which is their secondary school. That's through their teenage years up until I think 17, right? And then the plan was always for both of them to go to Oxford because Val went to Oxford. Okay. So that was it. But Ian is clear. It was his grades were just not good enough to go to Oxford. So she went, okay, well then I want you to go in and be one of the Royal Mounted people, the Royal Rifles. So she said, instead, I'm going to put you into the track at Eton to study and then get into the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst.
Right. And so she had him go to the Crammer.
Just to pass his exams to get into
to then go to the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, which is like going to the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, probably.
It's like college.
Yeah. And then it's basically now, so if this was in America, it would be okay, cool. So you got accepted in June, but you're not starting until September. So Eve basically said, how about you go to Austria? There's this, what they call a finishing school. And more or less, it's just, I don't think I have to explain a finishing school to you, but for anybody else that's out there, it's sort of it's a lot of it has to do with just teaching you how to be.
Etiquette.
Yeah, it's not just about how smart you are, it's about how do you apply those smarts. It's about when do you just shut up and don't say anything because nobody wants you to look pompous right now. It's they're going to push you into certain areas that they believe you're strong in because they're going, hey, maybe you didn't understand this, but you could be a mathematician, so you should go study this more because you could be a mathematician. Finishing schools will do that to you.
Okay.
It's sort of like the OG life coaches, I think. It's but they actually knew what they were doing.
Hey, if there are any life coaches out there, I give a lot of advice to family and friends, and I think I do okay at it.
I'm not trying to poo-poo too hard. I just
No, I know. It does seem
It's
like
just
everybody's
funny.
a life coach now. Like there's a lot of everybody's doing that, and it's like, oh yeah.
It's
And
one
then
of those where it
there's
feels like you have to be a very like. I wouldn't believe most life coaches because I don't feel like I could look at them and just go, oh yeah, you've got it all figured out.
You've got it all figured
so
out.
I really want to listen to you, and I don't believe that most of them do.
Well, and I think that like a life coach might, or even a business coach too, might like look at specific parts of what you need to do and have expertise on that. Whereas if you went to like a therapist, they may be talking more about like, this is how you cope with things.
Right.
This is understanding that the trauma of your father dying when you were 9 in the war has affected the blah, blah, or something. And like business coaches might talk about like, oh, when you encounter this sort of issue at work, or life coaches might say, when you encounter this sort of issue with somebody, I don't know. Anyway, but a finishing school. Great. Sounds good.
And by the way, we're going to be talking about this place. It's called the Tenoroff. It's in Austria. A town called Kitzbühel. We'll be mentioning it a good bit over this episode, maybe a little bit in the next. Because really, this was. It's like if I had the money, I would probably go to Ireland every 6 months, because when I went to Ireland when I was 21, it was just the greatest place I've been in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
This was Ian's Ireland. This was like he went there and just was like, I gotta come back as much as I possibly can, and would for really the rest of his life.
It's like camp.
Kinda. But we'll talk about it here. So in the rural mountains of Austria, Ian came under the guidance and tutelage of a man named Aaron Forbes Dennis, usually just called Forbes, that he would fondly remember for the rest of his life. Aaron Forbes Dennis was a former British diplomat and spy. And his wife, God damn it, her name is Phyllis Bottom.
Now I can only see Phyllis from The Office too, because she has a substantial bottom.
I'm more like, how you can fill this bottom?
I just
Did you not go there?
I just literally saw Phyllis and I saw her bottom, and then now she's like knitting the glove for Michael Scott.
Yeah, hand wash only on cold, air dry,
but don't get it wet.
Don't get it wet, right? Okay, so Aaron's wife, Phyllis Bottom, and I giggled every time I read that, was a writer that would later go on to write the 1937 anti-Nazi novel, The Mortal Storm, which depicts the effects that Hitler's policies and rule had on a common German family. It's kind of interesting. Though Forbes and Phyllis tried their best to rein young Ian in, he was simply too interested in everything else that the surrounding area had to offer. During his summer in Austria, Ian climbed 2,000-foot mountain peaks, swam and flirted with tourists in the Schwarzy River, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, and lounged in the cafes while sipping espressos and chatting with the local girls.
Yeah, obviously the ladies.
The whole summer was a blur of adventure and fun, but in late August, Ian was on his way back home with a starting date at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst of September 3rd. Assigned to the starting rank of Gentleman Cadet, Ian was assigned to Platoon 20 of No. 5 Company under the command of Major Lord Awen. Apparently, none of Ian's fellow Platoon 20 members went on to much success of their own, other than a man named Mohammed Ayub Khan, who would later become a Pakistani politician, even serving as the second president of Pakistan from 1958 to 1969.
Interesting.
Pretty cool, right?
Huh.
At the Royal Military Academy, Ian went through the usual military training, like marching day and night, instructions and practice for shooting rifles and pistols, horseback riding, more marches, meticulous inspections on how close his shave was, how clean his uniform was, how well kept his rifle and bed were, more marches, and pretty much everything else you'd think of when you think of boot camp, only British. And if we remember back to Queen Victoria, this was probably only like 20 years after mustaches were allowed. So, because that was Queen Victoria going, hey, if you guys want a mustache, go for it, baby. After a time, new cadets were referred to as, quote, broken in, and would then be enrolled in lessons for military tactics, map reading, special weapons training, and even political military history. However, Despite the military's best efforts, Ian was just not a soldier, at least in the traditional capacity, and at the end of his first term received 882 marks out of a possible 1350, which ranked him at 141st for his class.
Uh-oh.
Not great. It was around this time that Ian met his first love in the young, curly-haired daughter of a former Army colonel named Peggy Barnard. Ian had met Peggy through a mutual friend and had fallen for her almost instantly. Knowing that Peggy's father was a strict Army man, Ian won some early dad points by showing up to Peggy's house for the first time with a fellow cadet as an escort.
Aw, that's good points.
It's pretty cute, right? It's pretty nice. Peggy was said to have described Ian as, quote, extremely attractive, delightful, and irresistible. Due to his continued respectful approach to Peggy, the two were soon allowed to go on drives alone together.
Whoa.
I know. Ian was currently sporting a beat-up khaki-colored car called a Standard Tourer. We don't know what that is in America, but there's an actual brand in the UK called Standard.
Okay.
And it was called a Tourer.
Okay.
It's one of the earlier cars. And also there is a link on our website that has information on the exact car that he was driving and pictures of it too. So if you're curious on what that Standard Tourer looked like, again, there are going to be pictures on our website under the sources used. Ian and Peggy's favorite place to visit was a restaurant and pub called the Hind's Head, which is in a small town called Bray, just southeast of Maidenhead. And as a fun little aside, the Hind's Head is believed to have been established sometime in the 1400s.
Wow!
Okay? It is still in operation to this day.
Awesome.
And in 2013 was awarded a Michelin star.
Ooh, yes!
Freaking cool, right? So
Very
when we
cool.
go to the UK, we need to go eat at the Hind's Head.
Hind's Head.
Ian, literally, that was one of his favorite places to go. So he would like take dates there throughout his life. He would love to go to the Hind's Head. So, and again, it's still there, which makes me excited. Despite Ian having such deep feelings for Peggy, he was still forced to attend high society events in London where prospective mother-in-laws would attempt to woo him into courtship and eventual marriage with their daughters, obviously.
Yeah.
He did rub elbows with some big political names of the day, but found himself bored thinking of Peggy and wishing he was somewhere else, preferably a jazz club. In fact, it seemed that many times this is exactly what Ian did, despite the Royal Military Academy having strict rules about cadets being in their barracks before 10 p.m.
Oh.
So he'd
stay out late.
Breaking that a lot. One morning, as Ian's platoon leader was completing his morning shave and dress routine in preparation for a military parade that was soon to start, Ian, who was missing all night, came spilling through the door. He was still dressed in his tuxedo, complete with coattails, disheveled, unshaven, greasy, and clearly hungover. If the platoon leader wasn't such a seemingly nice guy, Ian probably could have been kicked out of the Royal Military Academy right then and there, but instead, he took him into his bathroom, cleaned him up, helped him with his uniform, and managed to get him into the parade on time.
Wow.
That's a mensch right there, dude. That is a mensch of a leader. You can probably see what's going on already. Ian is just not committed or even interested in a life of military service, at least not yet. Now, somewhat thankfully, Ian's military career was about to come to an abrupt end. See, for the past few months, Ian had been inviting Peggy up to his family home to stay while he was visiting. Ian's mother, Eve, really seemed to have it out for Peggy and did everything she could to be rude and make Peggy's stay unpleasant. Yeah. During one particular trip, Peggy was supposed to leave early to attend a commemoration ball at Oxford with another man. But remember, just like Ian had been attending various social functions for this exact same
People
reason...
were setting her up with other people.
Exactly. Yeah. Peggy, too, had other suitors who were trying to court her. Ian begged her to stay, but Peggy was set on leaving, one, because she had committed to going and she was a woman of her word, and two, probably because she didn't much like being around Ian's mother. In a fit of immature, emotionally charged rage, Ian gave Peggy an ultimatum. She either stay here with him, or he was going into London to, quote, find myself a tart.
A tart?
A tart. Yes.
No, I know what a tart is.
Peggy chose duty over romance and left for the ball at Oxford. Sadly, Ian kept his word as well, and indeed went into London to find himself a tart.
Oh, no.
When he got to the 43 Club in Soho, it didn't take long for him to strike up a conversation with one of the staff members and get to popping a few bottles of champagne. Before you know it, Ian was getting busy with a rando in the coat closet of Club 43.
Oh, man.
While I'm sure some of you listeners out there are thinking, this is pretty cool, let this be a lesson to all of you. What Ian discovered a few days later is almost perfectly mirrored by Cosmo Kramer's monologue in Seinfeld in the episode The Burning, when he says, quote, "Our eyes met across the crowded hat store. I a customer and she a coquettish haberdasher. Oh, I pursued and she withdrew, then she pursued and I withdrew, and so we danced, and I burned for her. Much like the burning during urination that I would experience soon afterwards." That's right. The random hookup from Club 43 had given Ian a nasty case of gonorrhea. The clap. Yes. Now, I wanted to provide an example as to why multiple sources are always a good thing to have when doing research. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned my primary source, a book called Ian Fleming, The Man Behind James Bond by Andrew Lycett, which was published in 1995. I also mentioned another book called The Life of Ian Fleming by John Pearson, but that John Pearson actually knew Ian Fleming, so a lot of historians see the book as being too close to the source. As a perfect example, in Andrew Lycett's book, he gives no alternative to Ian's dropout from the Royal Military Academy other than his contraction of gonorrhea. Like, it is statement of fact. It is like, yep, he got gonorrhea and like they basically kicked him out. That is what happened, okay? Now, John Pearson, however, doesn't even mention Ian's illness, and instead says that Ian was simply caught sneaking out off grounds one too many times, and that Ian could either face 6 months of barracks confinement or that he could just drop out.
Huh.
So John Pearson, the guy that knew Ian Fleming, was like, yeah, no, he was just a troublemaker and just was sneaking out too much, and they kicked him out. And Andrew Lycett's like, yeah, that's true, but really what happened was he snuck out and got gonorrhea, and they were like, yeah, you can't stay in the military because, one, you have to go to an outpatient treatment, and then two, we can't have you having gonorrhea in the military. It's like, can't have it.
Huh.
So yeah, I don't know what was going on there, but it seemed like John Pearson was trying to
Cover for his bro
a little bit. It is worth noting that Ian was very embarrassed about it. He never really talked about it. He would always lie about why he got kicked out. So I would imagine that John Pearson probably just got it from Ian. Ian was like, yeah, no, I just got kicked out.
Do you think that like he went to the doctor at the school to be like, what's wrong? And then they were like, you have gonorrhea, you're kicked out? Or like, how would they even know? That's my question.
So let's get into that. Though it is not made clear as to how... Wait for it. It is not made clear as to how Ian's mother found out.
Oh, gosh.
Eve did indeed learn the truth of Ian's recently acquired venereal disease. His mother's wrath was apparently next level in this case, as Ian remembers her tearing him apart, saying that he had let the family down, the military, his school, his platoon, her friends, and everything that she and the family stood for and held dear.
Okay, hold on a second. The woman who was having a post-husband's death affair kidnapped a girl, then went off, got pregnant with that guy's baby, and then came back and had a bastard child.
She's standing on the moral high ground.
She's standing on the moral high ground. She might have gonorrhea.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. So a few days later, Ian was sent off to a long-term treatment facility on Beaumont Street in London, while Evelyn wrote to the Royal Military Academy requesting that he be allowed to sit out the rest of the semester due to an illness. Ian's official transcripts from the Royal Military Academy state, drop term, sickness. That's it.
Okay.
However, not long after this, Ian decided that the life of military service just wasn't for him, no matter how much his mother pushed or how much he wished he was like his father, Val. In late August, Ian sent a letter to the Academy with his official resignation. Ian's Academy transcript officially end with, quote, "Resigned with effect from the 1st of September, 1927.
Okay.
Throughout the remainder of his life, Ian would lie as to the reasoning behind his departure from the Royal Military Academy, but now that he had dropped out of school, he had no plans for his future. Mostly because he gets forced into it, Ian will soon land his first job as a journalist.
Ah.
And that's where we'll pick it back up for part 2 of Ian Fleming.
Okay. I have one question about the gonorrhea.
Of course.
Did they have antibiotics then? Like, was he cured of the gonorrhea?
I don't think you can ever truly get cured of it, even to this day. I don't think there's a cure for gonorrhea.
I thought it was bacterial, and you just took antibiotics.
You could be right. You're the medical person. I am not.
I know. I watch a lot of Grey's Anatomy.
I know the history things. You know the medical things. So you tell me.
I mean, I could search for it.
We'll find. Well, this will be one of the questions that we can ask that we didn't answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure it can be cleared up. It's not. It's like the other one, chlamydia.
Yeah. Okay, so it is treatable, you're saying? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Is it bacterial? Is it just like does it need antibiotics, or is there a specific thing for it?
I think it's antibiotics. Hold on. Our intern is me today. Yeah, it's bacteria. So that's why I was wondering, when did we asked this before and I forgot. Antibiotics come out is the way that Google when did they come out?
When did they come out,
antibiotics were released in the 1940s. No, penicillin in the 1940s. Hold on.
Okay, that makes sense.
Wait a second.
There was probably some other treatment they had for gonorrhea at the time.
Okay.
What?
I am quickly summarizing what I just Googled.
Okay.
But probably many of us are familiar with the somewhat serendipitous event of September 3rd, 1928, that led to the discovery of penicillin by a doctor with the last name Fleming.
What?
Yes.
No way.
Hold on.
I mean, I cannot imagine there's a relation because
probably not.
But that is still a really weird.
Alexander Fleming was a Scottish physician scientist.
I wonder if it's like Ian's uncle or
who
something.
was born in 1881 and died in 1955. I feel like I may have known.
Wait, what was his name again?
Alexander Fleming. Alexander Fleming and Ian. Let's see. Fleming.
Dude, if there was a relation, that would just be wild.
Okay, there's an article that's like a tale of two Flemings. Hold on. The short answer is no. They were not related.
Okay.
But there was ironically some contact between their two families, which is the story of the biographers.
Yes, pretty much. That is wild. Holy cow.
His father, Valentine Fleming, was born a year after Alexander Fleming was, and they were not related.
Not related,
but
just
ironically had the same name. This is
really funny.
I don't know if you'll even be able to edit this to be coherent, but basically, in summary, I asked about were antibiotics invented because I believed that gonorrhea could be cured with antibiotics. They were invented. He dropped out in 28? 28, the same year. Did I just say September 3rd?
Yeah, which is also coincidentally a lineup date for the outbreak of World War II is September 3rd. Okay,
but September 1st was his effective date. September 3rd, the year before, was the date that he enrolled in the British. He started the British Academy. This is just woo stuff.
That is really weird. Yeah.
Anyway,
September.
So
1927.
It's possible. We're not sure exactly what the treatment for gonorrhea was in 1928 in the summer or that year.
Yeah.
Because penicillin was also discovered that year. So maybe it was already
radical new treatment that he was getting or something.
Who knows? We'll have to research that further. Intern!
Dude.
But that's super
crazy.
Super goofy.
Super goofy. Well, I can also just tell you, for anybody that's stuck with this episode so far.
I mean, I'm barely stuck with it, except that I'm like all over the place with these Flemings.
Well, it's pretty interesting though, right? First of all, like the beginnings of his life. But let me tell you this right now is that even though I personally don't find the information that I just talked about be boring, if you did, I understand. And let me just tell you.
What, like in the whole episode?
Yeah.
No, I mean, okay, if you
I'm not talking to you, I'm talking about the listeners.
I'm saying, but if like someone finds it to be boring, it's like, well, maybe this isn't the podcast.
No, I agree. But I guess all I'm just trying to say is, really a better way to say it is, episode 1 of this series is almost definitely going to be the most boring of the entire series, because this is all, just understand, very foundational information of like where he's going to be going.
It's the pilot.
So one of my best buddies is looking for a new job right now, and it's a little rough out there. We were just talking about this a little bit earlier, and it's been a struggle to say the least. You know, I've been in that spot before where it's a struggle to find a job. And so one of the jobs that he was looking for and was like applying to was one that, let's just say, he was not jazzed about. Okay, he was like, I don't know. I feel like I've done these other things. And
I've felt this
a good
this
job,
way
but I'll
before.
just go and do it or whatever. And the thing that I said to him is, I said, hey man, I've been going through this whole Ian Fleming series and reading about his whole life, and to me, he's one of these examples of people that if you judged him by the first 35 years of his life, I mean, yeah, what we're going to see, he finds some success in some other areas, partly because of his pedigree and his name and stuff like that, but he's never happy. He never likes doing the thing he's doing, even though it's making him pretty good money a lot of times. And if you looked at the trajectory of his career path, moving from this place to this place to this place to this place, you'd go, what are you doing, man? Like, it's just, like, they're sort of connected, but they're not, and they're different.
You might be able to say that about my career.
And that's exactly kind of my point here, is that ultimately, though, this person, the things that Ian ended up doing with his life are such incredible examples of how just because the earlier parts of your life were not spent doing the things specifically that you wanted to do, it didn't mean that it wasn't good training grounds. It didn't mean that it wasn't good and influential experiences and knowledge that he would then use later on in his life for these other things. We're going to get into it a lot more in the next couple episodes, but eventually Ian goes off into the British intelligence services during World War II. And it is one of these examples of just like, you would not have been able to be this person in the war, this intelligence person in the war, if you did not have all of these experiences.
If you didn't go to basic training, basically.
But not even just all these other things. Like, we're going to see examples of like Ian's young influences when it comes to writing, people that influence his creative mind, his imagination, and how he can dream up these scenarios. And you wouldn't think it, but that ability translated directly into his ability to dream up spy missions, literally. And so again, I guess where I'm going with this is just to say that he's an amazing example of how you never know the things that you're going through now. How will that aid you in the future? How will that help you in the future to do the thing eventually that you really want to do? And I don't know, for me personally, I feel like it's a relatable thought because dude, Aubrey, you've seen my resume. It is a bit all over the place. I've done a lot of stuff.
Saw of you was your resume.
Yeah, that's true, and it's a bit all over the place. And
well, mine is not. Maybe I don't have quite as much diversity in my stuff, but mine's similar too. And
yeah.
I'll tell you something. I don't know if I said this to you before, but even just a couple months ago, I was talking to my parents about what did I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
When I grew up, and they were like, I don't remember. And I'm like, me neither. I've never had a plan. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I'm about to turn 40. Like, this is fun. And I'll tell you, I was editing this video for this podcast, and like that, I lose track of time. I'm just going, and I'm like, all of a sudden it's like later, and I'm like, wow, I just did all this stuff. I don't know where I'm going to end up. I've always wanted to write a book. I mean, I've always wanted to write a screenplay.
So it's funny that you say that too, because my father-in-law, he was asking me a few weeks back about the writing process for this podcast, and he says, how much do you do? And I said, Mabel was like 45 pages I wrote, and then this one I'm on to page 34 currently. It's probably looking like it'll be about 60 some odd pages, I'm guessing, maybe just less, maybe 50 some odd. But it was, he goes, well, what are you going to do with that? And I went,
nothing.
I did with it. What do you mean? I wrote
I
I did it. It's out in the thing. And he goes, but couldn't you, like, maybe in a few years, if you have a bunch of them together, couldn't you put that out as like a compilation book? And I was like,
I mean, I guess, yeah.
Sure. I don't know if anybody would be interested in
Well,
that.
and then we
but,
had to go back and even better cite our sources a little bit. There's a little bit more. There's footnotes.
We would have to take it to an editor for sure. And be like, all right, make this readable.
It's true. I mean, I don't remember. I think I said how many words I had written on her on Victoria. So, yeah, that's interesting. So, your friend, did he apply for the job?
Oh yeah, he applied for the job. He's already gone through an interview. I think he's even had an in-person interview or so.
Cool.
And he's going down with it. I don't know where it's at right now. But again, this is one of these examples, and the reason that I brought this up was again that we're going to go through Ian's life here, and I hope that you're as surprised as me as we go through all of this. Obviously, we all know this guy created James Bond, but we're going to go through all of this. And yes, there are going to be a couple times here and there where Ian is going to say something to the effect of, I want to write books eventually, you know. But like truly and honestly, as we go through this series, and I would encourage all of our listeners to do this exact same thing as we're going through this, especially over the next episode 2 and 3, and even into episode 4, think in your mind, would I ever have imagined that this guy would go off to create one of the most sensational pop culture figures ever?
The word icon ought to be used.
Icon. Yes, man. I mean, portrayed by multiple actors over multiple decades, at this point over multiple centuries. It's again going through his life as he's living it all out. It was very surprising to me it's weird, surprising and not. And that's the coolest thing is you're going to learn this. It's amazing that all of these experiences that he had in these different weird, seemingly non-connected areas would ultimately lead into this like gumbo pot that would turn into James Bond.
Yes. I mean, we are all the sum of all of our experiences. And I was actually talking to 2 of my best girlfriends yesterday about some romantic mistakes we've all made.
Oh, of course.
And we were just like, we all had our own lesson.
Oh, yeah.
And like you learn from your lessons, you take those experiences and you do with it what you do. And this guy created James Bond. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of make a point to not look at anything about whoever you're going to be reading because I want to learn from you.
Yeah.
So I don't know when he like wrote the first James Bond, and don't tell me, but like I saw something the other day it was a picture of the Amazon office in like 1990 something, and he's like literally, it just says Amazon.com on a banner on the wall.
Yep.
And it says, don't let someone else's page 20 deter you from your page 1. And I was like, yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I certainly didn't know. I mean, I had terrible foresight. I went to college in 2002 to become a print journalist.
And look at you now.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm using some of those skills now.
Say.
But the funny thing is, like, you know, I remember I started at my first job, which was a business newspaper, biweekly business newspaper, and it was like they were starting to do online ads. And it was like, how do we even get people convinced that they should buy an online ad? Like, this isn't, the paper is the paper. And then it was all about circulation and how the pass along readership of the physical. We printed 7,500 papers, and the pass along readership was 3.2. So every issue that went out, one copy would be read by 3.2 people. So that actually meant our readership was 20 something thousand instead of 7,500. And that's how you get the ads. And it was like all this formula and stuff. And now it's like, was that even important? But then I was talking to someone the other day about, why do you keep getting free magazines from places that you never subscribe to? Because that's how they sell ads. Right. So I like know these random things, and at some point it'll become helpful in something that I'm doing.
No, I personally think, again, I find this whole thing with Ian Fleming to be very relatable, but I even think just like what you and I are doing currently, a little bit of our personal background, when Aubrey and I worked together at the same company, more or less what we were in charge of was, how do I want to phrase it? It was
customer onboarding and license enablement.
You said it much more, more matter-of-factly. I was going to say it gently. I was going to be like, yeah, we were in charge of like making sure customers understood the product that they bought.
Teaching them how to set up and use what they bought, and literally enabling it for them so they had access to it.
Yes, making sure everything was good to go, basically. And I personally believe that through that process, I mean, I did that for 3 straight years or whatever it was. It was like I had to be rapid fire on call anytime to just turn the energy on, be Daniel, and really bring it home, you know? And so like you wouldn't think it, but that exact experience translates into, well, I can get onto a microphone and I can talk very comfortably without really thinking about it much, because I just do this all the time. It's constant, you know? Or even a good example of one of the other software people have been calling us recently at the Biographers to do some work with us. You and I are sitting there going like, cool, let's talk about download rates. I want to talk about your customer retention and your cost to customer acquisition and where you guys at currently. And like, I don't think most of those folks are going to be prepared for what you and I are able to ask and bring to the table,
they're not going to expect it. They're not going to expect that we know some of these things.
Exactly.
And I think that a lot of us sell ourselves short. Like if you've been doing anything for a while, this is just like, I don't know, Aunt Aubrey out here telling you people out there to follow your dreams and whatnot. You know things, and one of the things that's important is that every single job you have, you're going to learn something, and it's going to change how you approach the next thing.
Absolutely.
And
100%.
Yeah, maybe you also might look kind of smart sometimes.
Even like so
which feels good.
Here's another good example of like you never can tell, kid. Is growing up, I was never discouraged from my movie making ways, but I was warned, let's just say, by most adults when I would tell them I want to be a director or I want to be a film editor or something like that. They would be like, "Ooh, man,
that's not practical. That's not realistic.
Get ready for competition, man. That's really going to be a rough career path kind of a thing." And it was like, oh, okay. But it never deterred me from making movies, editing movies, all this kind of stuff. And my point with this is that you never know the things that you do when you're younger, how they're going to benefit you when you're older. I would consider myself a very, very good editor at this point, not just because I did it when I was a kid. I have done it a little bit professionally as well, but I wouldn't have been able to do it professionally if I hadn't done it as a kid. And then now I'm doing this podcasty stuff and I'm having to make TikTok videos and I'm going, dude, I can crank these out because I did it as a kid, and it's like a muscle memory for me. This is to say, for any kids out there, any parents that have these kids and they're going like, oh, they're just wasting their time with anime and all these different types of things. It's like, I get you. It can be worrying. But what I want to say is that you never know. You just don't know. You may see a kid looking at anime and go, oh, this is not going to take you anywhere. But the reality is maybe when that kid gets to be 25 and they go to work, they make a really important connection with somebody else that's there because that person also was obsessed with anime when they were a kid. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be like a job related thing. It's like a personal engagement,
be a personal passion.
You know, it's funny. My dad does this thing where he goes to these properties that have loans, and then damage occurs from a hurricane or something like that, and then they get money issued. They take a draw from their anyways, they get money issued to fix the thing. He goes out. He's hired by the lender to review the property and make sure that the actual repairs are being done rather than the owner's just pocketing the money.
Yeah.
So he goes along, and he recently was on a property, and he was talking to the guy, and the guy was a little disorganized, and it took him longer maybe to see the different units in the apartment building they were supposed to, and they were kind of a little irritated with each other because he's like, you're the inspector man, and I know what I'm doing, and all this stuff. And then at the end, he's like, somehow my dad said, oh yeah, we drove down here and we went so I could get this pedal for my guitar. And the guy goes, oh, you play guitar? Mm-hmm. And then they're like buddies.
Yep.
And it's just interesting.
That's all it takes.
I mean, it really does. And I think that so many times in the world, we're all just like, we're different and we hate each other, and politics and religion and all these things.
Yeah.
And like people are so irritated with each other because we have to go fast, and we're like, you got to get things done. You have all these things to do, and you have all these notifications reminding you that you have to do blah, blah, blah. And sometimes you just don't like take a second to be like, oh man, you play guitar?
Dude, totally, 100% agree. And I feel like that's the stuff that makes us the most human. And it's funny you say that about guitar too, because I remember when I was in college, I took a classical guitar class, and my instructor was telling everybody how we needed to file our nails in a very specific way. For any classical guitarists out there, you know what I'm talking about. Right hand, you have longer fingernails. Left, you have short because of just the structure of how you're playing guitar. But the funny thing is he goes, guys, I will tell all of you, if you do this with your fingernails, he goes, you don't believe me. But he's like, the amount of times that I have like gone into a coffee shop and the person will just go, this one's on me. and I will look at them and they will have their nails filed in the same way. And I know they are also classical guitarists and they're going, this guy's a classical. He knows. I'm going to give him a free coffee because he's my buddy.
It's like the engineers wearing the pinky ring, the silver ring and stuff. I mean, it's just like a secret code.
It's these little things. And so anyways, this is all...
We're all over the place.
We're all over the place. But I will say, this kind of brings us back full circle to what we were saying at the beginning of the episode in continuously doing new things and making your days feel more stretched out. And I definitely feel like as I've been going through more and more of my research process here, and I'm getting into it these days, dude. I'm like regimented now, where I will put on pants and underwear just to do my research. I work from home, everybody, so like I wear sweats a lot. So but now I'm learning that it's like if Daniel needs to get into serious mode, the pants got to come on. So I'm regimented, and I'm like at least 2 hours a day of research and writing. I'm loving it. This is not like a Aubrey, you better be too. This is like the feelings that I get from doing this are like, oh, it's like I'm a kid again, where the weeks feel long.
Yeah.
In the best ways, because I'm pushing my brain into corners that they don't that it normally doesn't go to.
It's you're excited about what you have to do rather than you're dreading what you have to do.
Yeah, I think that's probably a part of it too. Well, we should probably wrap things up because we've been going for a while here, especially tangenting after the episode is over.
Squirrel!
So a few things that we'll wrap up here. I'll quickly mention McQueen Pipes. I'm pretty sure there's going to be an ad at the beginning of this episode for them, so I won't go into that one a whole lot, but just remember McQueen.
They should do a Valentine pipe.
They should just do a Fleming pipe.
A Fleming pipe. Wait, was it Valentine sweet. Or was it Robert Fleming that did?
It was Valentine.
Valentine was the pipe smoker.
Yeah,
Moki for Smokey.
Moki for Smokey.
Yeah, Valentine pipe.
That would be neat. But yeah, check out McQueenPipes.com. Use the code biographers at checkout. You're going to get 15% off of your order. Also check out metalworkbymiola.com for all of your chef's knife needs. Again, metalworkbymiola, MEOLA.com. Again, use the code biographers at checkout. You're going to get 10% off there. And then also our latest partner, which is meetevery.com, MEETEVERY.com. They are a new application out on the block, all about self-discovery, all about learning a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about how you operate, how you function, who you are. So go check out meetevery.com. It is a totally free application to download, and as of now, it's looking like we'll be sponsored there about once a month. We're going to be curating a little quiz that's kind of asking you questions again to help you discover more about who you are and who you are at the core of yourself and all that good stuff. So again, check out meetevery.com. Aubrey, anything else?
No, I don't think so. I'm excited to learn more next time.
Me too, man. I will also say, just as a preemptive warning, we have officially decided we are going to take a week off in December. So there's, and this, everybody, you don't have to worry about this for a couple weeks. This is going to be dropped on December 2nd, but I'm thinking like the last week of December we're going to take off. So there is going to be like a 2-week
gap instead of a 1 week gap.
Exactly. It's going to be a 2-week gap instead of, or I guess technically a 3-week gap instead of a 2-week gap. So I think that it's going to be like the 2nd, and then that'd be like the 8th or 9th. It would be no.
Now we're just
17th,
we're a little
maybe?
kooky. Okay, so we'll be on the 2nd, the 16th, and then our next episode won't be on the 30th. It'll be on January 6th.
There we go. So Ian Fleming Part 3 will be on January 6th. Ian Fleming Part 2 will be on the, you said 18th? 16th. And everybody will be busy with holidays maybe, or wrapping up the year for work and the things. We will too. I'm going to be visiting my family in Kansas.
Yeah, so we're just taking that week off between some episodes there.
So, but I just wanted to preemptively tell you, we'll tell you on the next episode too, don't freak out. We're not quitting. We're not done. We're just taking a little week off to take a breather, take some self-care, have a nice time during Christmas, all that good stuff. So yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up here, but thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you back here for part 2 of Ian Fleming next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.